Good afternoon, everyone. Today's October the 1st. This is the Salina City Commission regularly scheduled Monday afternoon meeting. Call the meeting to order and have the clerk call the roll.
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel. Here. Commissioner Crawford. Here. Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley.
Here.
Would those that are able please rise, join me for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Start our meeting today with the Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for any citizens with us that would like to come and bring an issue before the Commission or a comment to the Commission that's not a part of today's agenda. If there's any citizens here that would like to address the Commission, please give us your name and address. Seeing none, we move on to awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, the month of April 2013 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Salina. Andres Mata, youth member with the Human Relations Commission, will read the proclamation.
Proclamation of the City of Salina. Whereas April 2013 is recognized as the 45th anniversary of the passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, better known as the Fair Housing Act. Whereas the Fair Housing Act has helped open doors of opportunity for countless individuals and families, since it states there shall be no discrimination in the acquisition, ownership, possession, or enjoyment of housing. Whereas more work remains in our struggle to achieve equality and justice, it is necessary for housing discrimination enforcement agencies, housing investigators, consumer agencies, and housing providers to work together to ensure that every person residing in Salina, Kansas is provided decent, affordable, and accessible housing of their choice without fear of discrimination. Whereas all Americans should know their housing rights and responsibilities, the Salina Human Relations Commission, in partnership with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, will work hard to eliminate discrimination in housing in Salina, Kansas. Now therefore, I, Norman M. Jennings, Mayor of Salina, City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of April of 2013 as Fair Housing Month.
Excellent. Do you have any activities that you'd like to let us know that are going on to celebrate this?
Yes, we are holding our annual tenant seminar on fair housing on April 12th from 8:30 to 3 at the Webster Conference Center. We're also doing training at 7 housing complexes throughout the month of April. Landlords and tenants will participate.
Excellent. I have a signed copy of your proclamation if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you.
We have no other awards and proclamations. Today we do not have any public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time, so that moves us into the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of March 25th, 2013. Item 6.2, approval supplemental agreement number 1 with the Kansas Department of Transportation to exchange 2012 federal funds for the East Magnolia Improvements Project number 102808. Item 6.3, authorize the city manager to sign a request from the Kansas Department of Transportation to exchange 2013 federal funds for the East Magnolia Improvements Project number 102808. Item 6.4, reject bids for the 2013 asphalt pavement wide crack repair project number 132964 and authorize staff to purchase and install construction materials within the city manager's purchasing authority up to $10,000.
Are there any items that a commissioner has a question on or wishes pulled from the agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0. Now, we have no development business today, so that moves us to administration.
Item 8.1, second reading ordinance number 10,686, changing the zoning district classification from PC3 to PC5 and approval of an amended site development plan to allow an outdoor equipment rental display and storage to be added to the Waters True Value store located at 460 South Ohio Street.
This ordinance 13-10686 was passed on first reading March the 25th. Since that time, we've received no comments. Do we have any comments on this at this time? Seeing none, I bring it to the commission for action.
I move we adopt on second reading ordinance number 13-10686.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve on second reading ordinance number 13-10686. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.2, second reading ordinance number 10,684, amending Chapter 41, Article 2, Division 3, Sections 4161, 4161.1, and 4162 of the Salina Code pertaining to water conservation.
Ms. Tasker, you have some input on this item for us.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. At the meeting last week, I was not quite quick enough to jump up and say that we needed to get the ordinance passed the second time before we sent it on to DWR. And since that time, I've confirmed that. And basically, it's kind of a chicken and an egg game. They want to make sure that this is where we plan to go and that it's passed before they move through their process. So we can send this on with, assuming it's passed on the second reading, to DWR, and then they will send us the review and approval. And then the next step would be to ask for the delegation of authority. And once we receive that input back from the Division of Water Resources, we would publish the ordinance and place this into effect.
Excellent. Any questions of Ms. Tasker? Thank you. This ordinance actually passed on first reading last week in the March the 25th meeting. Do we have any public comment on this item today? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we adopt on second reading ordinance 13-10684.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve on second reading ordinance number 13-10684. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.3, certification of final costs for the 2012 special assessment projects. Sub-item 8.3A, first reading ordinance number 10,687, levying special assessments for improvements in the Magnolia Hill Estates Edition.
Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is the annual process of certifying the special assessment projects for the last year, 2012, Magnolia Hills Estates Phase 3, small subdivision project, adding on to Magnolia Hills Phases 1 and 2, and this third phase was 9 lots, approximately a little less than $31,000 per lot. 3 out of the 9 lots have been sold thus far, and so they're progressing, and this basically certifies the costs of that project, and then sets the public hearing for April 22nd for the public hearing for the costs that go on the assessment rolls, as well as the first reading of the ordinance which levies the special assessments after the public hearing process. guess that's it. I'll stand for questions.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Stack.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on this item today? Seeing none, so I understand that we need to set the date for the hearing of, excuse me, we need to continue the hearing into the further actions, Mr. Binkson, on this, keep the public hearing open. Is that the way this item's considered? We're setting the date and keeping it open, or how should that rightfully be phrased, or Mr. Stack?
Don't we open it on the we open the hearing on the 22nd?
Your motion
Just-
is the need to set the public hearing for that certain date.
Okay, just the need to
And then
set.
consider
Yeah.
the ordinance on first reading.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, she mails all the letters and notices out after today, so that everybody knows that the hearing is on the 22nd. So I think that's the process. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sounds like a Samantha motion to me.
Any other questions of staff, or? Seeing none, I would entertain that motion.
Since this one is so confusing.
That's why I mentioned you.
Mayor, I would move that we certify the final cost for 2012 special assessment projects and set April 22nd, 2013 as the date for the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to set the final cost and determine the date of the hearing. We also need a subsequent motion to approve this ordinance on first reading.
I move we approve on first reading.
Just
Sorry.
one moment. That was kind of a question. I didn't
okay.
put the question mark on the end of it.
So, Mayor, it was my understanding that the first reading would occur following the public hearing. I'm looking to Mr. Franz and Mr. Stack to be sure I'm not, or
First reading at the hearing. First reading
will
today.
occur today.
Okay.
Second reading will occur at the hearing.
Right. That's what I understood.
I apologize. I
So
was
we would
mistaken.
need
I'm sorry.
to modify the motion or have a subsequent motion with the motion seconded. It was seconded without the approval on first reading.
I think it would be best to consider them separately, Mayor, given that separate action on the motion for first reading.
So we've had a motion and a second to set the date for the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 13-10687 on first reading.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1310687 on first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.4, first reading ordinance number 10,685, establishing a SAFB RIFS multi-year capital improvements fund.
Mr. Franz? You're going to probably break down those initials for us, aren't you?
Yeah, I can try.
No, you don't have to. That's all right.
On December 17th, 2012, the City of Salina entered into an interlocal agreement with KSU, Unified School District number 305, Salina County, State of Kansas, and the Airport Authority, approving a consent decree with the United States government regarding responsibilities for the Schilling Air Force Base Remedial Investigation Feasibility Study, and there are your initials. Okay. To address the issue of groundwater contamination on the site of the former Schilling Air Force Base. This has been the outcome of, I think, several years of work. I'm not quite sure how many, but I do know it's been going on for some time. Under the terms of the agreement, the City of Salina has agreed to assume responsibility to account for the funds designated for the project and to essentially take the lead in that regard. The agreement does require that we establish a separate fund by ordinance, and that is essentially what this action does. Cost of the project is estimated to be $9,363,000. The United States government has agreed to contribute 90% of that amount towards the project. We anticipate those funds being in our hands sometime within the next 90 days. The remaining $936,300 will come from water and wastewater fund resources, and they have been designated in the 2013 budget for this purpose. A couple of comments based on review from legal counsel. There have been a few additions and minor deletions in the proposed ordinance to refer to the entire proper name of the fund as it is referenced in the consent decree and agreement, and also to make it perfectly clear that the outcome of this project, of the study, is a corrective action decision to be issued by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And at that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Franz. Do I have any public comment on this item today? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 13-10685, an ordinance establishing the SAFB-RI/FS Multi-Year Capital Improvement Fund.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 13-10685 on first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.5, first reading ordinance number 10,689, establishing a solid waste multi-year capital improvements fund. Sub-item 8.5A, first reading ordinance number 10,690, establishing a multi-year improvement fund for Kenwood Cove.
Mr. Franz?
I seem to be on a roll today. State statutes provide for establishment of multi-year capital improvements funds, which allows us to accumulate resources over a number of years to do specified projects that are called out in the capital improvements program. We currently have two of those funds established. One of those was first established in 1997 for flood and drainage improvement purposes. That particular fund is currently inactive, and we have no funds in it. It is unique, at least among for us, in that it does authorize a tax levy up to, I believe, 1 mil that could be authorized or levied annually for that purpose. Excuse me. Second fund designated for water and wastewater purposes was established in 2011, and we do move an amount of money into that fund each year in preparation for several major projects that we see coming down the road for the water and wastewater fund. At the time we talked about the budget for 2013, we also discussed doing a similar fund for the solid waste operation. Solid waste has a very irregular cash flow, and so the fund balance as it carries from year to year can fluctuate quite a little bit depending on the capital equipment that we have purchased, or in some cases if we're opening or closing cells. This ordinance basically implements that budgetary decision. The second fund is for the aquatics facility. At the time we adopted the supplemental sales tax, there was quite a bit of discussion about setting aside monies out of those proceeds for long-term maintenance and improvements to the facility, and this fund would again implement that desire. We currently have, through 2019, about $1.1 million designated out of the special sales tax cash flow to go into this fund. The bulk of those funds, and I believe it's about $800,000, are actually designated out of the final year for future improvements as we see the equipment, the pumps and so on, reaching the end of their useful lives and needing replacement. At this point, I guess I'd stand for questions.
Questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Franz. Do we have any public comment on this item today? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Move we pass ordinance number 13-10689 and 13-10690.
You probably want to make those
Do I need to do them
separate.
separate? Okay.
Separate, yeah.
I move we pass ordinance number 13-10689.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 1310689. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
And I move we pass ordinance number 13-10690.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 13-10690. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.6, resolution number 136993, authorizing the scheduling of publication of a public hearing to be held at the City Commission's regular meeting conducted April 22nd, 2013, concerning a plan to finance for the issuance by the City of Wichita, Kansas, of one or more series of its health care facilities revenues bonds issued under authority KSA 12-1740 in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $110 million.
Mr. Scruggs?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I expect that the initial question is why are we acting on the City of Wichita's issuance of $110 million worth of bonds? And as I expect you're aware, the Kansas Interlocal Cooperation Act provides that local governments can use their powers to cooperate with other localities, and that's kind of the starting point of this issue. By a separate act, statutes also provide that municipalities may use revenue bonds for specified purposes. As it relates to this topic, those specified purposes include promotion and advancement of physical health, location of new businesses, and expansion of existing businesses. And then it goes on to say that the proceeds of the bonds may be used for paying for all or part of purchasing, acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, improving, equipping, furnishing, repairing, enlarging, or remodeling facilities for commercial or hospital purposes. So in 1990, the City of Salina agreed to enter into an agreement as a participant with the City of Wichita, which authorized the City of Wichita to issue refunding revenue bonds related to Presbyterian Manor, both here in Salina as well as their facilities throughout the state. At the time of that interlocal agreement, Presbyterian Manor had revenue bond financing by way of 8 communities and 12 bond issues. 2 of those were City of Salina issues, one dated 1978 for $2 million, and one dated 1987 for $800,000. And so at that time, we entered into the interlocal cooperation agreement to agree to the refinancing of those bonds and kind of a consolidation of that issue under Wichita's direction. Recently, last week, in fact, we received a packet of correspondence from the City of Wichita that indicated that they'd been contacted by Presbyterian Manor, formally requesting a letter of intent from them indicating that their willingness to finance approximately $60 million in bonds for work in Wichita, Kansas specifically, an additional $7 million of capital expenditures for Presbyterian Manor properties in other communities in Kansas, and then refunding that 1990 issuance, I'm sorry, 2004 and 2007 issuance of bonds. So the City of Salina becomes involved since we're a participant in that original agreement, and that reissuance would involve refinancing bonds that pertain to a project here in Salina. The correspondence we received from the City of Wichita requested that we take the necessary steps to schedule a hearing before you, a public hearing before you on April 22nd, so that it lined up with their bond issuance timeline. Based on our required notice and our process, that gave us today as the latest opportunity we would have to schedule that hearing. So due to the urgency of the request, staff has proceeded with the action of merely putting it on your agenda for a public hearing on the 22nd. In the intervening time, we will review the nature of the request and prepare a formal recommendation for your consideration on April 22nd. With respect to our conformance with the strategic plan, We've identified that we have shared vision statement items of being a city exciting to live in and thriving both economically and socially, having a quality of life that appeals to our residents, encouraging and being supportive of industrial development and economic expansion, creating a community of mixed use, quality development, providing high-quality services, and maintaining growth and development policies that are up to date. So we feel like this action would be consistent with those. In terms of a fiscal note, this action in particular will not incur any expenses for the City of Salina. And then additionally, the way that the agreement is currently established and would continue, the City of Salina is not liable for payment of the revenue bonds that lies with Presbyterian Manor solely. So staff has identified 3 options for your consideration, and I would remind you that today is merely scheduling the public hearing. But you could vote to approve the resolution, which would set that public hearing date. You could vote to postpone consideration of that hearing, and I did have some conversations with staff and from Wichita and their bond counsel. Doing so wouldn't necessarily invalidate what they're trying to do, but it would set back their time frame and make it difficult for them. Or you could vote to deny the City of Wichita's request that we participate and schedule a public hearing. So I'd be happy to answer the questions to the best of my ability at this point if you have any.
Sure. Any questions of staff? Thank you, Mr. Schrag. Do you have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I bring it to the commission for any discussion and action.
So by simply approving our motion, that's going to set that date automatically to the 22nd, is that correct?
Yes, it'll authorize the necessary publication, and then it'll set it for April 22nd.
Okay. I move we adopt resolution number 13-6993.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve resolution number 13-6993, authorizing the scheduling for the public hearing to be held at the City Commission regularly scheduled meeting on April the 22nd, 2013. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0. Do we have any other business? We have a need for an executive session, so we need a sheet.
Oh. How many minutes do we need? Which one do you need?
We're going to need 10 minutes for personnel. 4:40.
I move we recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss the legal counsel matters subject to attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in those matters, and reconvene at 4:40 p.m.
Second.
Motion and a second to move into executive session for 10 minutes, reconvening at 4:40 for attorney-client privilege reasons. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We do not anticipate any action.